Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Today's warehouse needs to keep inventory moving smoothly and quickly. Meet these challenges with on-demand warehouse labeling from Brother Mobile Solutions. Our mobile and industrial printers will help optimize your operations to achieve the speed, reliability, and durability your warehouse needs. With easy integration for existing warehouse technology, convenient portability, and upfront affordability, Brother Mobile Solutions is at your side when it comes to warehouse labeling. Try one for free today by visiting brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse or click the link in the show notes. That's brothermobilesolutions.com/new warehouse to try one for free today.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Nilay Parikh. He is the founder and CEO at Arvist, and we're going to talk about Arvist, and also we'll talk a little bit about AI in the warehousing space and how AI is bringing some benefits, and also talk a little bit about the skepticism around AI too, and how we can address that. And I'm sure Nilay is going to attest that there shouldn't be any skepticism around AI, but we'll hear his thoughts about that too as well. So Nilay, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you very much, Ken. Glad to be here. I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Happy to get you on here and talk about Arvist and AI in the space. Definitely, I think, a hot topic. But tell us a little bit about, before we kind of dive into all that, tell us a little bit about your background, and you are the founder of Arvist as well. So how did you kind of come to this idea and start this company?
Absolutely, yeah. So just a little bit about myself. I am a first-gen immigrant, moved to the U.S. almost 12 years ago. Got my master's in aerospace engineering from USC, and since then spent a ton of time in the additive manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and supply chain space in general over the last, a better half of the last decade, I think almost 7-8 years now. Mm-hmm. And, one of my previous roles was at a Danish conglomerate where I used to set up these Industry 4.0 excellence centers for them across their supply chain, right? So at their headquarters in Denmark, of course, various locations in Europe, Asia, and in the US. And that's where, I had a chance to visit close to 60, 70 different warehouses, manufacturing locations, distribution centers. And the idea for Arvist, first started over there. Initially, we were focused a lot on how can we make safety more proactive, right, in warehouses and distribution centers and supply chain in general, because as you can imagine, it's very reactive in nature. After the fact that something happens, you would go and take action. And the idea was to use artificial intelligence or computer vision technology for that purposes. But over the last 2 years, since we first came up with the idea, we have pivoted a little bit more into the operations level insights itself because few reasons. For sure, companies want more operational level details instead of just having like silos of safety or productivity or quality, for example. And that was why we pivoted. But one of the major, insights, if you will, that we had from the time being spent in this industry was that most, if not all, of these Industry 4.0, digitization, whatever you want to call it, projects fail is because of one major reason, right? And it's the need for new infrastructure or adding new hardware. It involves a lot more complexity than testing out these kinds of solutions in a test lab settings or even in an excellence center kind of settings. And that was one, insight that we carried in as a philosophy into Arvist, that, hey, how can we leverage existing infrastructure, existing data, and which plenty of it is available in these environments.
Oh, yeah.
How can we use that and drive insights for our customers? So that's how Arvist came about. So we're still early stage now. We're deploying out at various sites across the U.S. as well.
Very interesting. And yeah, I mean, certainly I think there's a ton of data out there, right? But it's how do you kind of capture that and then do something with it to make it meaningful, I guess, in a sense, right? So, I mean, I guess tell us kind of like in a nutshell, I guess, in a sense, what is Arvist?
Absolutely. Yeah. So with Arvist, what we are building is a remote operations platform. We used to call it digital twin, but it got very confusing. But it's a remote operations platform for warehouse and distribution center operators without any new infrastructure costs. So what do I mean by that, right? Essentially, we are bringing in two different data sources into our platform. One is your existing security camera data. There's access control security camera systems are omnipresent, if you will, these days. So we are bringing in that video data, which becomes our eyes. And then we are bringing in data from your WMS or ERP platforms. And we are combining those two together to give insights with the context of the warehouse operations, right? So just to give you a few examples, when did the trucks come into your loading docks, right? How much time were the trailers there for? How can we help you reduce detention charges or demurrage charges if it's a rail yard? An immediate quality check of the pallets as they're being unloaded. How much time did it take to load and unload the goods? Was the staging wrong when it was being sent out? How much time did it take to move the goods from your loading dock to your racks and aisles and vice versa, calculating throughput and productivity of the facility in general. And then, of course, adding the risk mitigation component of it, like which are the areas in your facility which are most prone to accidents, for example, which corners are most prone to hazards, or if you have a food facility, which areas are in non-compliance where people are not supposed to go, or you're not supposed to store particular products over there. So overall, allowing warehouse operators to manage productivity, quality, and safety in a remote way is what we are building over here.
Very interesting. And I love that you're utilizing the existing security cameras that are already in place, because I think that one of the challenges, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, like one of the challenges around, utilizing AI and, trying to figure out all these different types of data and, offering supply chain visibility, which I think if you go to like a trade show, it's like every other booth you see, like it says like supply chain visibility, right? I mean, what does that even mean? But so, I mean, I love that you're doing that, because I think that, if I look at like warehousing companies and operations, I mean, traditionally in the larger picture of all the different companies that are out there doing distribution operations, not necessarily so tech heavy or tech focused, and in a way, in a lot of cases, like fearful of that tech change because of, changes like you mentioned to infrastructure or things like that. So I'm curious your thoughts on that and kind of the initial thinking of like, how do we reduce that barrier to entry to be able to harness AI and do more with data without adding like a whole nother layer and components and hardware and things like that to the mix?
Absolutely, yeah. And what you mentioned over there, barrier to entry, is exactly the idea behind Arvist and leveraging existing infrastructure, right? So when I was telling you before, like the reason for these projects failing, the sort of problems that we are solving can be solved by installing 500 new IoT sensors or buying 300 new wearable devices and whatnot, right? However, that exactly is what becomes the barrier to entry, because it becomes a capital intensive project. When it comes to scale across your facilities, if you have more than one locations these days, the size of warehouses, as like 300, 500 million square feet warehouses, it becomes really hard to scale up. But then also you have to remember there's a workforce challenge, right? We are dealing with a workforce which is in a lot of cases a temporary workforce. Change management is not always possible. It is possible if you have people, you train them, and then they're going to be there for 3 years, but sometimes they're there for only 3 months. Right? So how many times are you going to train people on new devices and new instruments? That becomes an additional component of cost, which is not calculated in ROI when you're talking about these IoT devices, right? So that was one of the ideas that, hey, how can we leverage what's already there, right? And make it like a step change for our customers instead of telling them that, hey, AI, IoT, enterprise level software deployments is going to cost you like $1 million in implementation. No, it's just like small step. How can we start at least moving towards better ways of making your warehouse operations more efficient?
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's such a great point there too about the change management aspect of it as well. I mean, like you mentioned, it's one thing to have to train an employee, but then like you mentioned, in warehouses, it's just traditionally there's a lot of turnover because people don't necessarily love that kind of work in a sense, and the people that are making longer term careers out of warehouse work is dwindling for sure. And it's interesting as you look at frustration points is certainly training is one of them, right? It can take a lot of time to train, and bringing in solutions that help you to be more efficient in the training process, or have the training process be less time consuming and things like that. I mean, only are more beneficial to the operation. I mean, I've certainly in my career I've had times where we bring somebody in and we spend 2 days training them, and then the end of the week, they stop showing up, right? It's like, that's just the way the kind of the warehouse world goes a little bit, I think, from the warehouse worker perspective. So it's a great point to point that out there. And I love, like I mentioned before, that you're utilizing that existing kind of things in there. So tell us a little bit, I mean, from that perspective, and you mentioned kind of the labor challenges, how is Arvist solution helping warehouse managers, supervisors to be able to better manage that workforce and optimize and make sure that they're getting the most productivity and efficiency around that workforce that they have in place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll lead off with a few examples, right? So It becomes more tangible. Let's talk about one of our customers where we are doing immediate quality checks at loading and unloading times. What happened was, before Arvist solution, they did have security cameras in place, right? But no one was really looking at them.
Yeah.
Now, whenever the pallets are unloaded, there was no one available, if you will, to go in and do a quick quality check of the pallets coming in. Now, we're not talking about product level checks or anything of those sorts, right? It's just checking if something was broken during transport, during transit, if it was skewed, fallen over, tipped over, things like that. That was like the bare minimum of quality checks, if you want to say. Now, no one was doing that. They would just unload it, put the stuff into their rack sides, wherever. And then when the time was there to ship it out, that's when they would check. And if you call up a vendor at that time, it's like, hey, it broke. They're not going to take the responsibility, right? It broke in your facility because it was there for more than 24 hours. It did not break in transit. And they were just losing about $30,000, $40,000 every month. Wow. Imagine, because it was, every pallet was about $10,000 of goods, and they were just assuming cost of doing business as 3 to 4 pallets being broken every month.
Wow.
Now, just a very simple solution was, we just reposition the cameras closer to the loading docks, and we do a quick quality check using our system. Now, what happened was, it allows the managers to get a flag. We don't tell them that, hey, which corner is broken. We're telling them that, hey, something's off, take a look, right? It allows them to not have someone in charge and blame them every time a bad pallet goes away. Instead, they can say, hey, there's something off, do a quick check, right? It makes the jobs easier, not just for the managers, but the workers as well, so that they're not on the lookout for something, but they know when something goes wrong, they can go in and take a look, right? So that makes the jobs of both managers as well as workers way more efficient. Another example, in a similar facility, we were giving loading and unloading times, and we were able to detect that loading docks 10 to 14 were always being unloaded way faster than the ones at the other end, on 50 to 60.
Yeah.
It became very apparent because 10 to 14 were closer to the exit doors. That's where people would take breaks, and they would see the trucks coming in, and they would immediately go in and be able to unload very fast. Right now, this is a very simple case where if you had managers on the floor all the time, then they would be able to notice this trend as well. But again, going back to the labor issue, we don't have people who can just sit and look at loading docks, right?
Yeah.
That's not a job someone wants to pay money for, or not a job someone wants to do either, right? So over here, again, optimizing resources when the trucks are coming in, and now they have a much more uniform time of how much time does it take to unload a truck on average, right? It's not a variable between 35 minutes and 3 hours, right? How can you plan your truck deliveries if you have such a wide range? When you have like a more optimal average, if you're able to optimize it, then you can plan your scheduling as well. So that these kinds of things make, when we talk about visibility, this is like very much an operations level visibility for the management itself inside these warehouses to make their jobs easier. I wouldn't say make it automated, but it makes it easier one step at a time.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think those types of insights, they're so hard to pick up on from a human perspective. Like, I mean, that example of, these docks 10 through 14 getting unloaded faster. I mean, like you said, like you would have to sit there and just watch and try to figure out something like that. But nuance of, hey, like it's closer to where people take breaks. So it's just natural that the people see these trucks first, like, versus other ones, right? So, I mean, that type of kind of insight is so hard to figure out from just watching as a human. So, I mean, it's really amazing to be able to capture something like that, and then figure out how do we now take action to apply that to across the docks, right? Or how do we, make sure that, like, hey, we're distributing the work in a proper way and addressing that with the employees so that they know that they need to spread out, or they need to, give it equal love to all the dock doors, right? So, So I mean, very, very interesting use cases there, and really like beneficial as well. So I mean, I'm curious because, this is all the data is being captured, but these insights are all being then driven by the AI tool that you've built.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Correct. Yeah. So it's, like I said, it's a combination of computer vision, which analyzes the video. And then, of course, we have analytics going into it, which allows us to give these insights. Right. So it's not just flagging for alerts or, things which are going wrong, but also driving insights from that. And are they like 100% accurate where it can remotely manage, tell the workers directly that, hey, go to loading dock 40? No. Right. But it at least can inform the manager that this is what's going on, and let's take corrective actions to mitigate these problems.
Interesting. So I mean, if I'm a warehouse manager, right, and I'm using Arvist, I mean, what does it look like to me if something is going on that, like, the Arvist solution has identified that there's an issue somewhere? Am I getting like some type of alert on my phone? Is there a dashboard? What does that kind of user interface look like?
For the warehouse worker, we have two ways of getting the information, right? So it includes both, it's a SaaS product. It's a software. We obviously have to have dashboards. Otherwise, we wouldn't be called a software company. So we have that, right? Where they get insights, they get reports, they can download it in their Excel, Power BI, CSV formats as required. the second thing that we are adding is also LLM, large language models into our platform, which would allow us to actually synthesize the data and create summary level reports, which can be sent out to not just the managers, but the executives of the company as well. Another way to consume the information, because even though graphs look really cool in dashboards, no one really wants to go and look at graphs on a Friday evening. They just want a quick report, like how's my facility in Chicago
they don't.
for example. Right? And the third one is the most important one, right? This stems from our experience in this area, that people in supply chain don't really sit in front of computers. It's not especially the warehouse workforce. Even the managers, they don't have time to sit in front of laptops and look at different dashboards. And there's so many softwares doing so many things, it becomes really hard. So we're trying to integrate with their existing WMS and ERP platforms. Like I said, we are bringing in the data from there, but we also want to export the data out there. So if they're already comfortable using a particular software solution, hey, these are the insights that Arvist got for you in the same platform. So you're not switching or logging into anything new, and the information is coming to where they are, right? So there's multiple ways to consume these insights that we are generating.
I think that's great. Yeah, and I love that you recognize that, especially on the warehouse side, like a warehouse manager, in my opinion, a proper warehouse manager is not sitting in front of the desk all day, right? It's not sitting at the desk, not sitting in front of the computer. They're on the floor, they're talking to the people, and they're trying to figure out improvements and how to make sure that, are getting the most throughput and capacity is being met. So, getting that time to sit in front of a computer and have to pull out all this data and all this thing is few and far between. And, I think it's great that you're recognizing that and trying to develop the solution so that, they get the information that where they're at, right? Where they're doing their work and when they need it to get there. So I think that's really, really good thing. So I'm curious, around the AI topic, right? There is certainly some skepticism still, I think, in not just within the supply chain warehouse industry, but I mean, just in the world in general, I think, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious your thoughts around that. Obviously you're embracing it as you have a company that's utilizing it, but I mean, how do you think you kind of address some skepticism around that, and how do you, maybe as you talk to potential customers or people in the industry that are feeling like, I don't know how I feel about AI yet. I mean, how do you kind of make them a believer, or kind of I guess die down that skepticism a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and skepticism is to an extent for sure justified especially at the pace with which things are evolving. Some of it is not. I would say there's also a lot of fear mongering in terms of the social media, what we see on Twitter and LinkedIn and things like that. Talking specifically for supply chain and the kind of things that we are doing, right? It becomes very important to get the buy-in, not just from the C-suite for these kinds of tools. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're going to increase the productivity or efficiency. So they're going to have a lot of interest. But then we also need the buy-in from the warehouse workers and the managers on the floor. And even if they're not directly utilizing the software, we are at the stage that it is a new enough technology that it helps to get their buy-in as well. What do I mean by that, right? One of the concerns is always around privacy of the employees. And this is not just relegated to like union-based workforces, but people in general, right? It's not the purpose of a software like Arvist to be like a Big Brother-esque tool to monitor people, right? We actually blur out all faces before we do any kind of AI analytics on the video feed, right? There's like zero facial recognition or identity recognition involved. But this is something that we need to tell the people on the floor, right? Hey, the cameras were already there, and we're just running analytics to gain insights for the operations. It's to improve your quality of work and your quality of safety. And we show them, right? We are in one or two cases, we actually put up a screen and showed them how the AI works on the back end, right? It helps, there's a certain level of education component. As AI companies, we need to do that as well, so people are comfortable with it. And also a certain level of, I wouldn't call it to the level of change management because we're not changing their processes, But again, it just flows into making people comfortable with the technology landscape that is in place. So that's, you have to take certain steps, even though it's not part of our job, but it becomes important if we want to go out and ask people to start using technology like this, that, hey, we understand the risks, we are taking measures to mitigate those risks as well, and that hey, this information is not being used in any bad way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah.
And then the second risk that always comes up is around jobs being replaced and automation and that level of that side of things. I think that it's a bigger problem for the robotics companies in that case, in terms of elevating those pains. But as we have noticed, right, even in the last few years, automation is gonna come in. It is gradually creeping in for sure. There's various factors for that to happen. But also, it's not going to be a light switch that we are going to go out to lights out warehousing or distribution overnight, right? I'm not saying jobs are not going to be replaced. It will happen. But there's also a part where we have to train people as like, hey, these are the jobs which can be replaced, and these are the jobs which will not be affected. These are the areas where we still require human intervention. And how can we educate people on that front as well? And this is talking about in generic terms, right? Not in warehousing, but in generic terms, how can we upskill people and workforce? Because other jobs will be created, right, as a result of this as well. So that's, again, it's going to be part education, part clarification, and part of fear is going to stay as new technologies come into place.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see, and I love that you kind of related it to the robotic side there as well, because it's kind of the same skepticism around that, right? Is like, is this robot going to take my job? Is AI going to replace me? And I think it's interesting to see, especially over the next year, next couple of years, like how that conversation might change a little bit. Because if we go back to the robotics and automation discussion of 4 or 5 years ago, there was like so much discussion around the dark warehouse and the lights out warehouse, right? And now, I mean, I don't hear that discussion as much anymore, right? It's become very much more of a collaborative type of situation, which I think AI will be similar in that sense, right? I mean, we talk about, how the warehouse manager really, doesn't have time to sit down and digest all this data and do that analysis. And I think that's like where the AI comes into play, right? To help them be able to see these things that, hey, they only have 2 eyes, right? So like, how much are they going to see in, a huge warehouse, huge distribution center? So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that conversation continues to evolve. So, I mean, sure.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, so I was just going to say, right, like you mentioned 4 or 5 years ago, the robotics conversation you don't hear about the lights out automation tools anymore, or at least we are hearing less about it.
Yeah.
And that's because people realized the limitations that come with automation and robotics as well, right? It's not a one-stop shop, right, for all our problems. And that's what the phase of AI is in right now. Everyone sees the potential of it, but they're not seeing the limitations of it. And, in a couple of years, I think this cycle is moving way faster than the robotics one. So maybe next 15 to 20 months, people will start realizing what AI is not capable of. And that would also subside a few fears on like how we can, just like with robots, work together to create solutions out of these technologies.
Definitely. Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see that. So, I mean, in your view, as we look at AI applications specifically in the warehouse itself, I mean, where do you think in the next couple of years, where does AI kind of take the warehouse, and what does the warehouse look like with AI in place in the next few years?
So one of the things that we have already started seeing a lot of use for AI is analyzing the tremendous amount of data, which already was there in terms of inventories, queues, overstocking, stockouts, things like that. And all of that was driven a lot by the massive fluctuations in demand during COVID, right? And after COVID immediately. So that drove a lot of the adoption over there. The next wave, if you will, is around these kinds of platforms where we're seeing a lot of safety tools, which we're seeing, drone-based inventory counting tools. There's what we are doing in terms of productivity, throughput, quality calculations, measurements, things like that. So that's the next wave around helping the managers on that front. And then, of course, a lot of times we mix robotics and automation with AI, and both of those are kind of parallel paths. As AI evolves, robotics also becomes way more smarter. So it's going to continue to help us move towards that more and more, I would say, level of sophistication when it comes to the automation, which in the warehouses itself. Again, I do not see a lights out dark warehouse anytime soon, and that shouldn't be the goal either. It should be to make sure our warehouses are running at optimal capacities. Right now, about more than 50% of the warehouses run below 50% of their capacities at efficiencies, right? And even though they think they're going at full speed, there's a lot of optimization which is possible. And I think we'll hit that 70-75% mark where we'll actually see the amount of productivity which can come through the same number of warehouses as well.
Interesting thoughts there. Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to see, how that plays out. And I think to your point, I mean, it'd be interesting to see too, like as further optimization happens within warehouses, because now, if in certain areas of the country you look and, especially where I'm at in New Jersey, I mean, it's just warehouses like all over the place. Like if we start to optimize individual buildings even further, I mean, does that now all of a sudden shrink the total number of warehouses that are out there, and what does that look like from a development perspective and all those types of things? So it'd be interesting to see how that kind of all builds upon each other and evolves over the next couple of years. So very interesting to talk to you here, Nilay, and learn about Arvist and also some of your insights around AI within the warehousing world. Definitely very interested to see how Arvist continues to evolve. I think very smart to be utilizing existing infrastructure in the security cameras and being able to drive those insights from different perspectives, not only from a safety perspective, but also from an overall operational efficiency perspective as well. So thank you for coming on the show today. And if people are interested in learning more about Arvist, what's the best way to do that?
So one of the best ways would be to go to our website, www.arvist.ai. You can also reach out to me. Very happy to respond. Love talking about AI, supply chain warehouses in general, as you can already see.
Yeah, we see
It's Nilay@arvist.ai, easy to reach. And also on LinkedIn. It's my first name and last name.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So Nilay, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.